Karen was still screaming when the bulldozer blade punched through the wall of her precious HOA office. Papers went flying into the air like snow in a storm. Her voice cracked as she watched the building crumble, piece by piece. It wasn't just a wall coming down. It was her control, her lies, her fake power. I stood there in the dirt I've walked my whole life, hands steady, heart calm. I didn't yell. I didn't smile. I just watched. That office sat on land that never belonged to her, no matter how many rules she made up. She thought the clipboard in her hand gave her power. But out here, it's the name on the deed that matters. My name's Mason Briggs, and I don't rent this property. I don't lease it. I don't answer to anyone who parks in my driveway without asking first. I own it, every square foot. The house on the ridge, the woods behind it, the workshop my father built with his own hands. It's been in my family for 3 generations. It's not just land, it's peace, it's hard work, it's my history. And for a long time it was quiet, until they showed up. New neighbors, new rules, and a president with too much time on her hands and not enough sense to leave well enough alone. She thought she could force her way in, slowly at first. Emails, warnings, community guidelines. But she made one mistake too many. She sank something she had no right to touch. That's when it stopped being annoying and started being personal. I don't live under her rules. I don't follow her lines on a map. I don't live on this land. I own it. Before all this started, life was simple. Not easy, but simple in the way you hope life can be when you've earned your peace. I had a stretch of land I grew up on, thick with trees, dirt that sticks to your boots, and a house built strong enough to outlast storms. My father laid the foundation. My grandfather cleared the first trail through the woods behind it. Everything I needed was here. The workshop out back, the porch that faced the sunset, the same porch I stood on every morning with a cup of black coffee, watching the sky change. Nothing fancy, nothing loud, just honest work, good soil, and quiet. That kind of quiet that gets into your bones. It wasn't just land, it was time, history, a place where memories don't fade. They stay in the air, in the smell of cedar, in the old boat engine oil, in the flag that's never missed a sunrise in 40 years. I kept things how they'd always been. No gates, no alarms, no rules beyond the ones we made ourselves. I let my dogs roam. I fished when I felt like it. I cleared trails, stacked firewood, and stayed out of people's business. All I wanted in return was the same respect. Then came the signs. First it was trucks, construction, surveyors walking too close to my boundary markers. I watched from my deck as they rolled in fast. Tract homes, new pavement, fake lakes with names like Sunset Estates and Whispering Pines. Places built to look peaceful but too clean to be real. You could feel it. Something was coming. The HOA called it Eagle Crest, like that name meant something. They sold it as a planned community, whatever that means. I just called it trouble. The kind that comes in pastel envelopes, carrying rules written by people who've never changed their own oil. They built close. Too close. Not just in distance, but in attitude. A few weeks in, I found a letter taped to my gate asking me to repaint my boathouse to match their approved earth tones. Like my lake, my dock, and my paintbrush were suddenly part of their little plan. That was the first time I said it out loud. The only rules that matter are the ones written in the soil by men who worked it. And I meant every word. It started small. A letter, folded neat and stuck to my gate with blue painter's tape. The envelope said, "Friendly guidance," like that was supposed to soften whatever nonsense was inside. It asked if I'd consider changing the color of my boathouse. Said something about maintaining visual harmony from across the lake. I laughed, tossed it in the fire pit without a second thought. I didn't paint my boathouse for their view. I painted it the same way my dad did, with the same color he mixed by hand in a rusted metal bucket. That paint had history. Their color chart didn't. Then came another letter. This one about a sign I'd posted. No trespassing, nailed into a birch on the old trail. They said it was aggressive in tone. I said it was honest. I'd been maintaining that trail since I could swing an axe, long before they showed up with their synthetic rope railings and QR code trail markers. They never asked if they could cut through my land. They just acted like it was theirs. Soon, I started finding their suggestions more often. One was about my dock being a safety concern because it didn't meet their design guidelines. Another mentioned my dogs being off-leash, on my own land. Every note had that same fake-friendly tone, like they were trying to correct a child without getting the parents involved. I let them pile up. Didn't respond. Just tossed them in a shoebox by the door. But I was watching. One morning, I saw a couple walking their dog right across my dock like it was a public pier. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and told them they were 50 feet past where their rules ended. The man looked embarrassed. The woman rolled her eyes. They left, but it didn't end there. Something had shifted. It was in the way their flyers showed up on windshields, the way they walked slower near my fence line, like they were taking inventory. It wasn't just about rules anymore. They were testing the edge, pushing it an inch at a time. The wind hadn't hit yet, but I could feel the pressure drop. Something was coming. Her name was Ruby. She was a 19-foot wooden fishing boat, hand-built by my dad back in '73. Cedar strip hull, brass rails, and a low rumble in the engine that felt more like a heartbeat than a motor. I grew up on that boat. Learned how to tie knots, fix leaks, cast a line. My dad used to say a man's boat should never leave his hands or his water. He kept her like a museum piece, and I did the same after he passed. Every winter I'd sand her down and revarnish the hull. Every spring she'd go back in the water, shining like she'd never aged a day. She wasn't just a boat. She was family. One day, a new kind of envelope showed up. Not the usual passive-aggressive junk. This one was certified mail, hand-delivered by a kid who looked too nervous to speak. Inside was a packet stamped with something called the Eagle Crest Environmental Review Board. I'd never heard of it, because Karen had made it up. They claimed Ruby was an unregistered pollutant, a safety hazard, and the best one, a lakefront aesthetic disruptor. The whole thing read like someone ran a legal textbook through a blender, and at the bottom, in bold letters, was a fine, due in 14 days. I stuck it on the fridge with a trout magnet and didn't lose a minute of sleep. But Karen doesn't like being laughed at. And a week later, Ruby was gone. The dock was empty. The ropes were sliced clean. No wake, no signs of drift. She hadn't floated off. Someone had taken her. I searched the shoreline, checked the trail cams, combed the woods. Nothing. Until that afternoon, when Karen came drifting by on a paddleboard, smug as ever. "Looking for something?" she asked. "You have one chance to tell me where my boat is," she smiled. "Oh, it's still here, just underwater. We relocated it, for environmental reasons." I didn't speak. I just stared. She kept talking about some fake motion they filed, some made-up concern about oil leaks. Then she paddled away like she'd won something. I dove that same day, took 2 hours and a full tank, but I found Ruby resting sideways in the silt, 15 feet under. The tow rope was cut. The hull had impact marks. Someone had dragged her out and sunk her on purpose. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't a mistake. I stood on the shore, soaked and shaking, not from the cold, but from what I knew I had to do next. This wasn't a fine. This was sabotage, a deliberate act, and it was war. After I pulled Ruby from the lake and saw the damage up close, I didn't yell. I didn't storm into their office or call the sheriff. That kind of reaction is what they wanted. Loud and emotional, something they could twist into a threat. Instead, I walked straight to the barn, opened the old steel cabinet my grandfather kept locked, and started digging through files we hadn't touched in years. Dust covered everything. The folders were thick, heavy with papers older than I am. Surveys, deeds, maps, and handwritten notes in my grandfather's perfect blocky script. That's where I found it. A survey from 1958, back when this whole area was still raw land. It had everything. Boundaries marked by trees that no longer exist, property lines etched with a carpenter's precision, and most importantly, the original coordinates of the ridge, the shoreline, and the old foot trail that ran along the east bend of the lake. I pulled out a newer survey, too, one done in 2012, the year Eagle Crest got their permits approved. It looked clean at first, but something felt off. I laid both maps side by side on the workbench, taped a clear grid over the top, and lined up the north points. That's when I saw it. A shift, small on paper, but big on land. About 30 feet of difference between where their line ended and where mine began. And right in that gap sat their beloved HOA office, built with glass walls and fake columns like they owned the view. But the foundation? The pipes, the wiring, the soil under every square inch of that building. It was on my land. All of it. I walked the perimeter myself, GPS in hand, just to be sure. From the rusted iron stake buried beneath the red maple at the southeast corner to the slope near the creek. Every reading matched my grandfather's map. Their building didn't just edge over the line. It sat deep in the wrong place. And they had no idea. That office they were so proud of wasn't just out of line. It was trespassing, unpermitted, illegal, built on land they didn't own, land I paid taxes on, land with my name carved into it. They spent all that time trying to push me out, and they never once looked down. That's when it hit me. I didn't just own the lake. I owned the dirt under their empire. I didn't rush it. When you're holding something this heavy, you take your time before dropping it. I spent the next few nights at the dining table, surrounded by old survey maps, drone images, tax records, and a land deed with my name written in ink thick enough to bleed through. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Karen had sunk my boat and smiled while doing it. Now I was going to hit her where it hurt, through the one thing she actually cared about: control. And this time I wasn't using my fists. I was using facts. The first thing I did was draft an eviction notice. Straightforward. No yelling, no threats. Just the law. It spelled out exactly what part of their office building was on my land, how long it had been there, and how many days they had to clear out. I made sure it looked official, printed on thick paper, sealed with a wax stamp that had been in my family for years. I could have emailed it. But I wanted this to land hard, so I had it hand-delivered by a bonded courier in a full black suit. He walked up to their office door, asked for Karen by name, and placed the envelope in her hand. No words, just presence. Next came the invoice, 10 years of unpaid use, itemized by square footage. I pulled market lease rates, adjusted for inflation, added modest penalties for utility access, and tacked on a 4% annual increase for good measure. It came out to just over $287,000, due in 30 days. I slid that one through their office mail slot myself. As I walked away, I looked right at their security camera and tipped my hat. The fallout came fast. First an email from Karen, then one from her vice president, then a lawyer whose name sounded like he was made out of vowels and empty threats. They asked for a peaceful resolution. I didn't answer. A couple days later, they tried to play it cool by holding a board meeting in the same building I just proved didn't belong to them. So I showed up. no yelling. Just walked in, chest cam rolling, holding a copy of the deed. Karen started to speak, but I cut her off. "This isn't your building," I said. "You built it 30 feet onto my property, which means it's mine. You've got 30 days to move out." They stared. Murmurs started. Someone in the back laughed. Karen didn't. This wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about reminding them that power built on paperwork can crumble just as fast as anything else. I wasn't just drawing a line in the sand. I was firing the first legal volley. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. At first, they tried to stay quiet. Karen sent out a polished newsletter to the neighborhood calling me a rogue landholder with a personal vendetta, claimed I was threatening community safety. But people weren't buying it, not after everything that had come out. The eviction notice, the invoice, the drone footage, all of it started making its way around town. I didn't post a single thing. But I didn't have to. The story carried itself. Then the leaks started. At first it was small, an anonymous email with meeting minutes attached, nothing big. But then came a photo of Karen at a spa retreat, paid for with HOA funds. Then receipts. Then a copy of her signature on a check for emergency landscaping that just so happened to match the exact upgrades in her backyard. One by one, people inside her own group started sending things. No names, no faces, just proof. Turns out, not everyone in that HOA liked being told what color to paint their mailbox, or getting fined for leaving their trash cans out too long. I sent everything to a local reporter I went to high school with. He didn't need much convincing. A week later, the headline hit. HOA office built on private land. President under investigation. The comments section lit up. People who'd stayed quiet for years started speaking up. Former board members, neighbors, even her own volunteers. And still, I didn't say a word publicly. I just watched as the truth did what it always does. Cut through the noise. Karen tried to keep it together. She held a meeting in the office like nothing had changed. But the room wasn't full anymore. The looks weren't friendly. And outside, more people were watching than listening. She wasn't in control anymore. She was exposed. The morning of the demolition was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that usually comes before a storm. The sky was heavy with low clouds, and the air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. I stood on my porch before sunrise, coffee in hand, staring out toward the eastern ridge where their office sat. From where I stood, I could just make out the red survey flags I'd planted a week earlier, lined up like markers on a battlefield. That building had no business being there. And today, it would be gone. At 6 a.m. sharp, the sheriff's cruiser pulled into my drive, followed by a black SUV from the zoning board and a flatbed carrying a bulldozer the size of a small house. Sheriff Colton stepped out, nodded once and said, "You ready?" I handed him the court-stamped demolition order, signed and sealed. "Been ready," I said. They posted the final notice on the HOA office door. 30 days expired, violations confirmed. Then the crew rolled in. 2 bulldozers, a backhoe, and a camera crew from the local paper. Word had gotten out. A small crowd had gathered near the trailhead. Neighbors, board members, even a few people from town. Some were whispering, some were filming. No one said much. Karen showed up 10 minutes later in a white Mercedes, hair pulled back, sunglasses too big for her face. She jumped out before the car even stopped and rushed toward the bulldozer with a stack of papers in one hand and a megaphone in the other. "This is illegal," she shouted. "You can't do this. We filed for emergency review." The sheriff didn't even flinch. "Review was denied. You're trespassing, ma'am. Step aside." She turned to me like I'd stolen something from her. "This is community property." I pulled the deed from my coat pocket and held it up. "This is private land. You built on the wrong dirt." Then came the sound I'd waited months to hear. The bulldozer roared forward, slow and steady. Karen tried to block it, standing in front like she thought she could stop a steel machine with her voice. She was moved aside gently by a deputy. The driver didn't even look down, just did his job. The blade hit the building with a low, cracking groan. Glass shattered, walls caved in, papers flew into the air like ash. It wasn't just a structure falling, it was a lie being torn apart in plain sight. The crowd watched, phones up, mouths open. Someone let out a quiet cheer. Another just whispered, "It's about time." I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I just watched it all come down, one panel, one pillar, one fake promise at a time. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like correction, like something finally being set right. After the dust settled and the machines rolled out, the land felt different. Not just cleaner, but quieter. Like it could finally breathe again. Where their office once stood was just soil, scarred, but honest. I walked the perimeter one last time, touching each red survey flag like it was a promise kept. No glass, no columns, no noise. Just open space where arrogance used to stand. I spent the next few weeks focused on Ruby. She came up waterlogged, but not broken. I stripped the damaged wood, replaced what I needed, rewired the engine, and polished the brass till it gleamed like it used to. It wasn't about restoring a boat. It was about restoring a piece of my life they thought they could take. When she was finally ready, I set her back in the water, tied off with a fresh rope, and nailed a new sign to the dock. Private. Trespassers will be publicly shamed. Where the HOA office once sat, I placed a stone marker. Nothing fancy, just a flat granite slab with words carved deep and clear. Here stood the empire of arrogance, returned to the ground it never owned. People stop by sometimes. Some take pictures, others just nod and walk on. I don't need to say much. The land speaks for itself now. The rules haven't changed. You don't touch what's not yours, and you don't build on ground you didn't earn. I still sip my coffee on the same porch every morning. The flag still snaps once in the wind. And the lake, my lake, is calm again. This time the silence isn't just quiet. It's earned. There were moments that didn't make the main story but still stick with me. Like when Brent, Karen's second-in-command, tried to act like he wasn't part of it. A week before the demolition, I caught him slipping out the back of the HOA office with a box of files and his laptop. I asked, "Leaving so soon?" He stuttered something about preserving records for the county, but I already knew the auditors had subpoenaed everything. He was trying to save himself. Typical. Then there was Marlene from down the road. She used to smile and wave when she passed my place. After the HOA formed, she stopped waving and started reporting me for things like unapproved fence repairs. But after the eviction notice went out, she showed up at my gate with a blueberry pie and a folded-up HOA newsletter. "Thought you'd want to see what they're saying about you," she muttered, eyes low. I didn't take the pie, but I took the paper. It had a drawing of me labeled "Threat to Harmony." I almost laughed. Word traveled fast in town. At the hardware store, people stopped pretending not to know what was going on. One guy leaned over the paint counter and said, "Heard you're about to knock down the Queen's castle." I said nothing, just nodded. That was enough. People love a story where the bully finally gets pushed back. Even the teenagers with their skateboards and earbuds started hanging near my dock like it was some kind of landmark. One of them spray-painted "Land Winds" on the old Eagle Crest welcome sign before it got taken down. I left it up for a while. Not everyone picked a side. Some stayed quiet. Others watched from their windows. But by the end, silence said enough.